All right, let's go. Number 10, the genetic blueprint. In 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick discovered the double helix structure of DNA, fundamentally changing our understanding of life itself. What they didn't anticipate was that decades later, this same molecule might contain evidence of something far more unsettling. The concept of directed panspermia, first proposed seriously by Crick himself in 1973, suggests that life on Earth wasn't an accident of chemistry, but a deliberate act of cosmic engineering. The implications of this hypothesis extend far beyond simple seeding of primitive organisms. Consider the mathematical precision embedded within our genetic code. In 2013, researchers Maxim Makikov and Vladimir Sherbak from Kazakhstan published findings that sent ripples through the scientific community. They discovered that the number 37 appears with startling frequency throughout the genetic code. The combined molecular mass of the 20 amino acids that form the basis of all known life equals 74, precisely double 37. This isn't a single occurrence. The pattern repeats across multiple levels of genetic organization. Yuri Rumor identified in 1966 what's now called the Rumor transformation, demonstrating that the genetic code divides perfectly into two equal parts, each following distinct mathematical rules. These aren't approximations or rough correlations. These are exact mathematical relationships embedded in the fundamental architecture of life. The stability of DNA as an information storage medium is unparalleled. It can survive extreme radiation, dramatic temperature fluctuations, and the vacuum of space itself. The bacterium Deinococcus radiodurans survived 3 years of exposure to the space environment in controlled experiments. If an advanced civilization wanted to send a message that would persist across cosmic timescales, DNA would be the ideal medium. The message wouldn't degrade, wouldn't require power, and would self-replicate with each new generation. We've been carrying it inside every cell of our bodies, copying it billions of times, never thinking to read it as anything other than biological instruction. The most disturbing aspect isn't that the code might contain a message. It's that we're only now developing the mathematical sophistication to recognize it might be there. How many generations lived and died copying this potential message without ever suspecting its true nature? What becomes clear is that DNA is both universal for carbon-based life and mathematically structured in ways that transcend mere biological function. Number 9. The constants that shouldn't be constant. The laws of physics rest upon fundamental constants, numbers that appear to have no derivation, no explanation, simply values that must be measured and accepted. The speed of light, the gravitational constant, the charge of an electron. These aren't arbitrary, yet we have no theory explaining why they hold the specific values they do. In 1928, Paul Dirac developed an equation attempting to reconcile quantum mechanics with special relativity. The mathematics predicted the existence of antimatter before any experimental evidence existed. Dirac himself later stated that the universe appeared to be constructed by a mathematician of extraordinary order. The precision required for these constants to permit life is staggering. If the strong nuclear force were 2% weaker, protons couldn't bind together and the universe would contain only hydrogen. 2% stronger, and stars would consume their fuel so rapidly they'd explode shortly after formation. The electromagnetic force, gravity, the cosmological constant, each operates within an impossibly narrow window. Adjust any by even a fraction of a percent and complex structures, let alone life, become impossible. Physicist George Motsis and colleagues at Universidade Estadual Paulista demonstrated in 2007 that are maximally efficient. Physical theory requires only two-dimensional constants. All others could theoretically be derived or expressed differently. Yet our universe operates with these specific, finely tuned values that happen to permit observers to exist and measure them. The anthropic principle attempts to explain this by suggesting we can only exist in a universe with these values, making our observation of them inevitable. But this explanation feels incomplete when you consider the alternative possibility that these constants were selected, tuned, adjusted to specific values for a specific purpose. The fine structure constant, a dimensionless number describing the strength of electromagnetic interaction, holds a value that permits atomic complexity. Change it slightly and chemistry as we know it becomes impossible. No complex molecules, no information storage, no life. Consider the alternative, that an intelligence wishing to communicate across cosmic scales might choose to encode information not in radio signals that fade, not in physical artifacts that decay, but in the fundamental structure of reality itself. Constants that don't change, relationships that hold true everywhere in the universe. Mathematics that any technological civilization would inevitably discover. A message written in the language of physics itself, waiting for someone to read it. Number 8. Quantum entanglement as a communication channel. Einstein famously called it spooky action at a distance, a phenomenon he believed would ultimately prove quantum mechanics incomplete. In 1964, physicist John Bell developed a theorem that could test whether hidden variables explained quantum correlations, or if the universe truly operates through non-local connections. Every experimental test since has confirmed what Einstein refused to accept. Quantum entanglement is real. When two particles become entangled, measuring one instantaneously affects the other, regardless of distance. Not faster than light, instantaneous. In 1982, Olling Aspect conducted experiments that violated Bell's inequalities, confirming that no local hidden variable theory could explain quantum mechanics. The universe, at its most fundamental level, is non-local. Particles separated by cosmic distances remain connected in ways that transcend space-time. In 2017, the Chinese satellite MISSIS achieved quantum entanglement between photons separated by 1,200 kilometers. This wasn't a laboratory curiosity. It was a functioning quantum communication system operating from space. The technology exists, the physics is understood, the infrastructure is being built. Now, consider this. Research by physicist Michael Boyle suggests that a civilization using quantum communication would require antenna arrays exceeding 100 kilometers in diameter to maintain coherent states across interstellar distances. We don't have instruments that could detect such transmissions. Our entire radio telescope infrastructure, everything we've built for SETI, operates on the assumption that advanced civilizations would use classical electromagnetic radiation. What if they graduated to quantum communication millions of years ago? Every particle in the universe that has ever interacted remains quantum correlated at some level. This includes particles in our bodies, in Earth's atmosphere, in everything that's been exposed to cosmic radiation. We exist in a universe where everything that's ever touched remains connected through quantum correlations. The question isn't whether the infrastructure exists for quantum communication. It's whether we've developed the right instruments to notice it's being used. Studies show that quantum states can encode more information than classical bits. A single photon can exist in superposition of multiple states simultaneously, carrying exponentially more information than binary systems. We've been listening to the cosmic radio spectrum for decades, hearing mostly silence and interpreting that silence as absence. But quantum channels don't produce radio noise. They don't leave electromagnetic signatures. We could be surrounded by quantum communication networks, particles in constant states of entanglement carrying information across the cosmos. And we would have no idea unless we knew exactly where and how to look. Number 7. The collective unconscious as a shared database. Carl Jung proposed in the early 20th century that beneath our personal unconscious lies a deeper layer, universal to all humanity. He called it the collective unconscious, populated by archetypes, universal patterns of behavior and experience that appear across cultures without direct transmission. The hero, the mother, the shadow, the wise elder. These patterns emerge independently in mythologies separated by oceans and millennia. Jung identified these through decades of clinical work, analyzing thousands of dreams, studying world mythology, examining the recurring symbols that patients produced without cultural exposure to their origins. The patterns were too consistent, too universal, to be coincidental. Patients would dream symbols that matched obscure alchemical imagery they'd never encountered. Children, in their first remembered dreams at age 3 to 5, would produce archetypal content paralleling ancient myths. Jung's explanation was psychological, suggesting these archetypes arose from inherited structures in the human brain, evolved responses to universal human experiences. But there's an alternative interpretation that becomes more plausible when you understand how information can be encoded non-locally. The Global Consciousness Project at Princeton University has operated since 1998, using random number generators distributed across 41 countries to detect correlations in global consciousness. On September 11, 2001, their instruments registered significant deviations from random behavior beginning hours before the attacks occurred. The equipment detected changes in global psychological state before the conscious mind could process what was happening. This suggests consciousness isn't purely local, confined to individual brains, but participates in some form of non-local field. Imagine a civilization that achieved what we're only beginning to explore with quantum entanglement, the ability to encode information in non-local fields. They wouldn't need to transmit signals through space. They could imprint patterns directly into the substrate of consciousness itself. Every human who ever lived, who ever will live, would have access to this information. It would feel native, innate, emerging from within rather than received from without. The archetypes would function as a user interface, translating complex information into symbols the human mind could process. Consider how much information could be encoded in this system. Not just simple patterns, but entire frameworks for understanding consciousness, ethics, social organization, psychological integration. All of it accessible through dreams, meditation, creative work. Any state where the conscious mind quiets enough for deeper patterns to emerge. We call it intuition, inspiration, the muse, the collective unconscious, but what if it's infrastructure? What if Jung discovered not an evolved feature of human cognition, but an installed system? A cosmic database accessible to any consciousness that reaches sufficient complexity. Number 6. Mathematics as the universal language. Prime numbers are special, divisible only by themselves and 1. They follow no predictable pattern yet appear with mathematical regularity. In 1974, the Arecibo message transmitted toward the globular cluster Messier 13 included a sequence of prime numbers. The assumption being that any technological civilization would recognize their significance. Mathematics doesn't require translation. Pi holds the same value whether calculated on Earth or in the Andromeda galaxy. The golden ratio appears in spiral galaxies, DNA helixes, and ancient architecture. The Fibonacci sigmerges in flower petals, Hurricane formation, and distribution of matter in the universe. These aren't human inventions but discovered properties of reality itself. Physicist Eugene Wigner wrote in 1960 about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in natural sciences, noting that mathematical structures map onto physical reality with precision that seems almost miraculous. We develop abstract mathematics, pure theory with no practical application. only to discover decades later that reality operates according to these same principles. Quantum mechanics was predicted mathematically before experimental confirmation. General relativity was an elegant mathematical theory that made testable predictions about reality. It's as if the universe is written in mathematics and we're slowly learning to read it. But here's where it becomes unsettling. The mathematics we discover could itself contain embedded information. Not the numbers themselves, but the relationships between them, the patterns that emerge at deeper levels of analysis. The distribution of prime numbers, for instance, connects to the Riemann zeta function, which links to quantum chaos, which relates to the distribution of energy levels in atomic nuclei. These connections weren't designed by humans, they're inherent in mathematical reality. A sufficiently advanced civilization wouldn't need to broadcast signals. They could encode information in mathematical relationships, knowing that any intelligence developing technology would inevitably discover these patterns. The Mandelbrot set, a simple mathematical equation, produces infinite complexity. Zoom into its fractal boundaries and you find patterns repeating at every scale, structures of extraordinary beauty and complexity emerging from a relationship that fits on one line. If such richness exists in simple equations, what depth might hide in the mathematics governing reality itself? Number 5. The cosmic microwave background as a universal billboard. In 1965, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson detected a persistent radio signal coming from every direction in the sky. They thought it was interference, even checked for pigeon droppings in their antenna. What they discovered was the cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself. This radiation permeates all of space, a snapshot of the universe when it was only 380,000 years old. The temperature of this radiation is uniform to within 1 part in 100,000, showing only the slightest variations. Satellites like COBE, WMAP, and Planck have mapped these variations with extraordinary precision, producing detailed images of the infant universe. But there's something else in the data, anomalies that don't fit neatly into standard cosmology. The cold spot, a region of space where the background radiation is significantly cooler than surrounding areas, has no conventional explanation. Larger than 600 million light-years across, it violates predictions about how uniform the universe should be at such scales. Then there's the axis of evil. An alignment of the largest temperature variations that shouldn't exist in a universe that's supposed to be isotropic. In 2006, the Arcade balloon experiment detected a radio signal 6 times stronger than expected, coming from no identified source. Consider what the cosmic microwave background represents. A signal that's been propagating through the universe for over 13 billion years. Reaching every point in space, remaining detectable with technology only slightly more advanced than what we possessed in the 1960s. For a civilization wanting to leave a message that would persist across cosmic timescales and be discoverable by any emerging technological species, this would be ideal. We've trained our algorithms to filter out anomalies, to smooth over irregularities, to find the patterns predicted by theory. What if the anomalies aren't noise but signal? What if those cold spots and alignments encode information we've been systematically removing from our data as artifacts? Number 4. Fast radio bursts as technological signatures. In 2007, astronomer Duncan Lorimer discovered a millisecond duration radio pulse while analyzing archival data. The signal was extraordinarily bright, coming from beyond our galaxy, releasing in a few milliseconds the energy our sun produces in days. We now detect them regularly, mysterious flashes from across the universe. In 2016, FRB 1-1102 was discovered to repeat, flashing multiple times from the same location. This ruled out cataclysmic events like supernova or colliding neutron stars. In 2020, astronomers detected FRB 180916 repeating on a 16-day cycle. For 4 days it pulses multiple times, then falls silent for 12. This periodicity is difficult to reconcile with most proposed natural mechanisms. The energy requirements are staggering. To produce a signal detectable across billions of light years requires either extraordinary natural processes or intentional transmission with massive power. What makes these signals particularly intriguing is their narrow frequency range and short duration. Both properties you'd expect from artificial transmissions designed for maximum detectability with minimum energy expenditure. Consider the possibility that we're detecting deliberate transmissions, beacons meant to attract attention of emerging technological civilizations. The signals are bright enough to be detected across cosmic distances with relatively modest equipment. Their millisecond duration makes them distinctive, unlike any common natural phenomenon. A civilization wanting to announce their presence might choose exactly these characteristics. We're treating these as astrophysical mysteries requiring natural explanations because that's our default framework. But the properties increasingly resist conventional interpretation. Number 3. Synchronicities as non-local communication. Carl Jung introduced the concept of synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences that occur with no causal connection. A person thinks of someone they haven't contacted in years, and that person calls minutes later. You dream of a specific unusual event, and it happens the next day. Jung proposed synchronicity as an acausal connecting principle, suggesting that events can be meaningfully related without direct causation. The Global Consciousness Project provides empirical data suggesting consciousness might indeed affect physical systems. Random number generators distributed worldwide show consistent deviations from randomness during global events that capture collective attention. The 2004 tsunami, major terrorist attacks, all correlated with measurable anomalies in the output of machines specifically designed to be unpredictable. If human consciousness can measurably affect random number generators during collective emotional experiences, and if quantum entanglement demonstrates that non-local correlations exist at fundamental levels of reality, then synchronicities might not be coincidence but evidence of information transfer through non-local channels. Instead of transmitting information through space using electromagnetic signals that degrade over distance, information could be encoded in the probability structures of quantum events. Consciousness would naturally interface with this information. The experience would feel like intuition, coincidence, synchronicity, from the perspective of an intelligence trying to communicate across cosmic distances. This approach has significant advantages. No signal degradation over distance, no timer delay, no need for massive transmitters or receivers. The information appears wherever consciousness exists, available to anyone whose mind is in a receptive state. Number 2. Directed evolution and genetic engineering. The Cambrian explosion occurred approximately 540 million years ago, a geological instant during which most major animal phyla appeared in the fossil record. Prior to this, life consisted mainly of simple, soft-bodied organisms. Then, over a period of 10 to 20 million years, an extraordinary diversity of complex body plans emerged. Eyes, limbs, shells, internal organs all appeared with remarkable rapidity. The speed of this diversification has puzzled evolutionary biologists since Darwin. Then there are orphan genes, sequences that appear in the genomes of specific species with no apparent evolutionary precursor. They don't resemble genes in related species or show signs of gradual evolution from simpler forms. They simply appear, fully formed and functional, as if inserted rather than evolved. Consider an alternative possibility. What if Earth's biosphere has been subject to periodic interventions? Genetic material introduced at strategic points to guide evolutionary trajectories. This isn't evolution versus design, but directed evolution, where natural selection operates on genetic variation that includes introduced material alongside random mutations. The introduced genes would function naturally, integrate into existing genomes, be passed on through normal reproduction. The Cambrian explosion represents one of Earth's major evolutionary innovations. If you wanted to accelerate development of complex life, introducing genetic innovations that enable new body plans, new sensory systems, new cognitive capabilities would be the most efficient approach. The implications are staggering. It would mean Earth's biosphere is a managed garden. Interventions designed to accelerate development toward complexity and intelligence. Number 1. We are the message. In 1977, NASA launched Voyager 1. Carrying a golden record containing sounds and images from Earth, we encoded information about ourselves in a durable medium, sent it into space, and hoped someone would eventually find and decode it. Now, consider the reverse scenario. You're an advanced civilization billions of years old, and you want to leave a message that will persist longer than stars burn. You could build monuments, but they erode. You could transport data, or you could create life itself as the message. DNA is the most sophisticated information storage system known. It's self-replicating, requiring no external power. It's self-correcting, using redundancy and repair mechanisms to maintain integrity across billions of reproduction cycles. And it's already distributed across an entire planet, copied trillions upon trillions of times, backed up in every organism. If you wanted to encode information that would persist until a civilization arose capable of reading it, you wouldn't use metal or stone or electromagnetic radiation. You'd use the living organisms themselves. The message wouldn't be separate from the messengers, it would be intrinsic to their biology. Readable once they achieved sufficient technological sophistication to sequence genomes and understand genetic codes. The researchers who found mathematical patterns in the genetic code weren't looking for messages from aliens. They were studying the code's structure, trying to understand its organizational principles. The discovery that specific numbers appear with extraordinary frequency was incidental to their main research. This is exactly how you'd want a message to be found, not by people looking for aliens, but by scientists doing routine work, stumbling across patterns too precise to be coincidental. We might be living libraries, each of us carrying information encoded billions of years ago, waiting for the species to develop enough to read it. Not just instructions for building proteins, but deeper layers, mathematical relationships, patterns in the patterns. Information encoded at levels we haven't yet learned to access. Every human who has ever lived carried this information. Every organism on Earth potentially contains pieces of it. The message isn't scarce or fragile, it's distributed across the entire biosphere, backed up quintillions of times. We've been searching for extraterrestrial intelligence by listening to the sky, looking for radio signals, watching for artifacts, assuming contact would come from outside. But the message might not be transmitted through space. It might be transmitted through time, encoded in the very biology that allowed us to evolve intelligence. We are simultaneously the messengers and the message, carrying information across billions of years, waiting for the moment we're sophisticated enough to read what's written in our own cells. If you want to see more videos like this, click on the video on the screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.